Welcome back to class, dear students. In this course, we are going through GraphQL for Web3 front-end development, and it will be a GraphQL crash course, similar to how I did this API crash course, which if you miss, you should watch, and other ones like the JavaScript, so that what that means is that every basic things you need to get started as a beginner with GraphQL will be learned in this single lesson, so that you can now use AI to support you to do everything you want to do, and you will have understanding of what the AI is actually doing. So let's keep rolling if you have missed the API crash course. And at the end, we also take our capstone project, which is the full stack token minter dApp we are building gradually. So we'll take it from API, just REST API or RESTful API, and transform the API to a GraphQL based API so that we can use it. And also some of the limitation I mentioned under the API, how does the GraphQL help you solve them? So we'll discuss a lot. That's why I had to create this table of content so that it gives a basic. You see what will cover, what is GraphQL, section, server, convert, and some other things like that. So that's why I have put up this as well. You can see we'll learn about how to set up GraphQL server, and this is not just to show you, we actually use it in project, how you might use it in your project as well. In the dApp minter, we use it, we convert the REST API to GraphQL, and a lot of other things we'll learn there. You can see them and browse through them as well. So let's get started. The first thing is, what is GraphQL? GraphQL is a data query language which serves as an API management layer between the front end and the back end. So we have already learned, when we learned the API, that your API is all this arrow that creates connection between your middleware, front end, and back end. So now GraphQL is just like a layer on top of API itself to remove some of the limitations and also give you a superpower that you will not see in normal REST or RESTful API. So it's just like API, that's how I see it. But this comes with its own kind of basic, should I call it scripting language, or I call it organizing language, like how you organize your API, and we learn a lot of that. So let's go back. So before diving into practical aspects, it's crucial to grasp what GraphQL is and why it's beneficial over traditional REST or RESTful APIs. So Graph API allows you to query exactly what you need, no more, no less, which can significantly reduce the amount of data transferred over the network. That means reduce your bandwidth usage and speed up your application. I've mentioned this through the API, so if you missed that section of the course, make sure you go back and learn about it. From that previous API course, we were able to make this API call to CoinGecko API, which gives us prices of cryptocurrency to display in our dApp, and we have this Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana price, Jupiter price, and things like that. So we have them working fine. If we refresh it, it works fine. Yeah, retrieving crypto prices, and you see it, the prices has moved. So because this is a live price, so it can move up, it can move down. Now, when you look at all this now, we also thought about when you use expect. Let's go to this. Yeah, okay, because we moved somewhere else. So now we have the console working. When you do the inspect, we have learned this as usual. If I close it now, respect. Then we go to console. So to track whatever is going on with our JavaScript. So from here, we got this object, as usual, Bitcoin and other things, which is what we eventually displayed here, as you can see them. Now, we did all that in the API. Here, we begin to see the difference. One of those things I mentioned in terms of data fetching. Why do we need GraphQL as a layer on top of like API again? Why can't we just use API? So it's an argument some people say, which it makes sense in some cases, but it's not in all cases, especially when you are building a robust dApp that deals with back and forth, fetches a lot of data with a lot of API. If you deal with GraphQL, you will do yourself better. You might reduce, I can't grade it, but maybe reduce your bandwidth usage by maybe 10, 5, 10, 20, 30%, depending. That is something. So than just the normal direct RESTful API. So let's try and see, when you talk about data fetching, you fetch specific data with a single query. But in this case, you fetch predefined data from multiple endpoints. And that's what happened here. If we go back to this code here, you notice that we are calling this API v3 simple price. So that means from this endpoint, we can only get price. So what about if we want to get, and this price is about like current price, you can see it. So what about if I want to get historical prices like 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, to use in my dApp to do a lot of things or whatever? What about I want to get the graph? You get a lot of things like that. So I need to go to another endpoint. Or there may be some endpoint, you see here. You see those endpoints here. The simplest, fastest endpoint that return list of coin on CoinGecko and their respective price, market data, historical data, metadata, image, description, link, follower, token supply. More exclusive endpoints are available to discover trending coin, newly added coin. Do you see now? I need to deal with all this mess of like different endpoints. Now, if I need price, I use this. It's as simple to get price, but then I need other things. Then I can use this. But the point here is that this also is giving me too much that I needed. You can see one, it's giving me coin price, coin list, like price, like I got a market data, which can contain a lot, historical data, like I said, the price history and other things, metadata, like image, description, link, followers, token supply. Look at that. More exclusive endpoints and a lot of things. I need to work with contracts. I need to use it. So if I need to use this, I may need to make call. For just a single user, I may need to make calls to like 2, 3, or even more endpoints at the same like time for just a single user that reload or visit our site. Now talk of if we are having thousands or hundreds of thousands of users, then we'll be spending a lot in bandwidth, a lot, both for us and those we are calling. And that's why the more of this endpoint you are using, the more you will need to pay. Though we are using the free version, but you will have to use the paid version to be able to, carry all those type of calls. You understand what I'm trying to say? So, but now when you talk about GraphQL can combine every of these things into one. You say after all, this one combine it. But the problem is if you use this, it will give you all these data points, which eventually maybe you just need image and price of the token. And this can give you just the price and the name, but this also give you image and maybe a brief description. That's the 4 points you need. But now you need to carry and receive almost 10 data points. which the other 7 will be useless, or 6 or more will be useless. But don't forget, they add to your bandwidth. They add to what this CoinGecko or whatever the API you are using will count as part of the query you are making, which determine the price they charge for each API call and how many times you can call it per second, per minute, per hour, per day. So you will see that before you know it, this thing quickly add up to your cost and your bandwidth, your hosting and everything. But what about if you can just make a call to like this coin through like GraphQL? If this was done through a GraphQL endpoint, then you can specify that while I make call here, I only need bit the token price, the token name, the token price, the historical price for just the last 1 week, and maybe the description and the image. Those 5 data points, that's it. And GraphQL will ensure you only get that, and you also need maybe something from the contract of that coin. You will be able to make a single call which will include the contract, include the other 5 things you need, even include for NFT in a single call. Yet for each of these things, you only receive what you want. You don't understand? So if this, like I said, this coin is giving us almost 10, 15 data points, then add this also NFT, we already have almost, let's say 18 to 20 data points that is coming. Useless for us, because at the end of the day, we only need about 6 to 7 of them. What do we do with the rest out of the 20? The rest, we still have about 13. They are there, they are useless, yet they are consuming our data. So by using the GraphQL, you are able to now tell this that, okay, through the GraphQL endpoint, pick 3 out of this, 5 or 5 out of this 10, pick 1 from me from here, pick 3 from here, pick 2 from here. Good. Return the 7. And any other thing that's there, I'm less concerned about them because I don't need them. And then you are able to just get that. You use a lesser, because don't forget, each of these things you are looking at, each of these, let's see, each of these you are looking at, they are data, they are an object. They could be 1 kilobyte, they could be 10 kilobytes. You understand? They could be 15 kilobytes, they could be 100 kilobytes. The more objects they carry, the more, normal, the higher the size and all those things. So, and the more the size you are transferring through your network or hosting and all those things, the more bandwidth and all those things you will consume. So why should you transfer more? So those are parts of the differences in terms predefined data from multiple endpoints. You see, we need to fetch from multiple endpoints. I've explained, we call it no overfetching or underfetching. So this should be overfetching. So no overfetching, but common overfetching or underfetching. So that's the problem we can see live here, that this endpoint, which we are already using, is underfetching. It's just specifically fetching price. Now, a name, which is Bitcoin, Ethereum, Jupiter, Solana, and the price. Now, I need the historical to like maybe the last 1 week price or 1 month price. I need the image, I need the description. Now, I need to go and make call to another endpoint. So if you argue, oh, you can just make call to that, then, what happened here is it's underfetched for me, because I need more, about 7 data points, but it's only giving me, and I need for NFT as well. This is never going to give me NFT. It's only fungible token that's going to give me. So I need to call another endpoint. Now this one, if I now call this also give me even more. That's overfetching. This is giving me almost like 10, 15 endpoints. I just need about 3 to 5 of it from here, and then the others from the NFT. So now I have excessive data costing me more to fetch that I don't need, that I don't use. You understand things like that? So that's the issue with overfetching and underfetching. Then request method, single post request for all operation. Now, see, if you are doing this RESTful API, what we are doing here is what we call get request. So behind the scene, when you are setting up this API, the developer that set up this API, they are saying set up this endpoint to only receive get request, which means they are not giving you the power to change their data. So most of all these things you see are purely get endpoint. So you can imagine. So this is just for you to receive the details. You don't have power to change. If you want to change, it's after you have received it, then you can manipulate whatever you want to do on your own site. That's your own responsibility. But the API itself will never allow you because it's purely get request. But then you also have the one that can change the request, which is the post. Like you post the request there, it goes there. That's like when you are dealing with your own database, for example, you can post it there and then deal. Or maybe it's like you own the coin or token and they allow you to update some things which will be verified or something. You post it. When you post on social media, you are actually making a post request to the database of Twitter, database of Web3 social media like Solarplex, Farcaster, and some other things like that. So you are essentially making the post request to them. So to post this, then you can as well not just request, manipulate, and also delete whatever you sent there, making like delete. So you can imagine you need to create this kind of list of endpoints just for get request alone. So now what about when you need put request? And some can also argue, why can't you just make this also to do like post request? The danger there is that, for example, look at those people, the developer working behind the scene, they will have another API that is not public between their database that hold this, where they keep posting to update the price. You understand, things like that, to add new token. That is not because if you make it to work in one place, number one, it's difficult. Number two, is it's a security vulnerability because anybody using this can just adjust your data and make the data less reliable for people to depend on. So you don't want that. So that's why users must be assured that this only allows. So whatever they get there is 100% accuracy of what you have on your platform. Not that somebody hijack it and then manipulate it. You understand? So you need to recreate all this again for post, for delete. You get all those things. So become messy like that. And all this, you get it sorted with just a single endpoint, which we still see. You get all those things sorted. Endpoint structure, single endpoint for all type of data, all type. But here now, you have seen it, you need multiple endpoints. Then data manipulation, queries for fetching and mutation for update. So you have query, we learn about it. Then you have mutation, that's like changing, similar to like post, delete, and things like that. Now, when you look at this, you just, in a single API request, a part you specify what you want to fetch, a part can specify if you want to change. You understand? But here now, you see, COULD operation mapped to HTTP method. You understand? So I think create, read, update, delete. So all these things now is post. I think post is for create and put is for update. Then delete, normal, you delete and get the information. So those are those things you will need to do to work with this. And you are dealing with multiple endpoints to do each of these things. So, or maybe 2 or 3 to handle the 4 endpoints, but only one and one single call. And it makes it difficult to make single call in a single request because it's not the same endpoint, and you don't want, those people will not allow it because of vulnerability. So they don't want people to gain access like that. So you can see it now catching complex due to vary the response because you are dealing with multiple data, so it's complex, simpler to uniform response because you just get the object and then you deal with it, but it's not like that. It could be complex. So that's why for basic API call you may not use GraphQL, but when you are dealing with complex API calls, your dApp depend on it, massive user, GraphQL is your best bet. Error handling, detailed error message with status in the response. Then status code, like API has different status code, like when it's 200 it means it's successful, it's okay. When it's like, when you are using site and site says 404, it seems the page doesn't exist and things like that, so it uses that. So understanding GraphQL structure. So we are getting more practical now, and we always get to the practical. In case you are watching this lesson for the first time, being your video, we try to explain things better, then we now do the practical. We are going to transform our REST API call in this dApp, which is currently powered by the REST API call you see here. Fetch is crypto prices. Then we turn this over to become GraphQL powered. So we'll do that together. So there are still a lot of practical to work on. So let's learn the basic. We have GraphQL schema. It's divided into 2 main parts. The GraphQL schema, this defines how the API will structure. It defines the structure of data that can be queried. It's also divided into 2. Schema, it is used to fetch and read data, which we have learned. Query. Then we have the schema mutation. It's used to create, update, and delete. So that's when you define the type, query, and we need the crypto price and ID. You still see it at work. Then we have the mutation to update and things, which is like this: update crypto price, type, mutation. So that's what makes it to know, are you trying to fetch information or update information? So once it sees query, it knows you are only querying the blockchain or whatever. But in this case, you want to update the smart contract or API or whatever. Now, so mutate or mutation. Then we have GraphQL resolver. We have GraphQL schema and GraphQL resolver. GraphQL schema is further divided into 2, the query and the mutation schema. Then the GraphQL resolver, when you receive the information, for example, from this query, remember when you are using API, when you use the then and things like that, that means you receive the response and then process it. So you need to resolve whatever response you receive. You see, resolve the query, and then maybe it's the mutation, update, and whatever like that. So section B, set up GraphQL server. So how do you now set up the GraphQL server? Compared to API, that's why many people will just use the API directly, because all you need is just to pull up your call correctly and you are good to go. But here you also need a server, because don't forget, you are now having, similar to like this now, you are having like your GraphQL in between, making the call here now. So it's making the calls between the 2. Yeah, so you need to understand that as well. So it's serving like the middleware now between your front end and like whatever API or backend you are reaching. So you need to be able to undo that aspect to tell it what it has received, how do you resolve. So there need to be like a server to undo it for you. So it's just like when you are building, you have this API that has this API key. You usually need to call through server. If not, if you call like this now, look at this. it will just expose your API key and other people will just spend your money. Like, see this now. I can literally see whatever this is meant of, like the elements is built of. I can just check them. You get what I'm saying? Or literally just view page source, and then I can see some things that are running in there, and this gives me like HTML and some other things like that. When I want to see the JavaScript, I check through this and I'm able to see what JavaScript is running, the network is making like this now. This shows me the, can you see the API call? Let's refresh this now. You will see. You see that as this is loading, we are making some API calls. You see 200. I say if I'm able to locate the particular one that is making the call. This one like internal call to the external CSS. So I told you once it's 200 is successful. So content script. So there are ways you can just inspect, and maybe because this doesn't have the API key and those things, so you just see, people will just inspect and see your API key, copy it, and you discover that a day you are previously spending maybe $5 or $10 with your dApp with API calls users are making. Suddenly in one day you spend 1,000 or 10,000 because other people. So you don't want to have it. Anything you have playing in your JavaScript is front end, so it will be exposed. You understand? It will be exposed. It will be exposed in the front end for users. So you don't want that to happen. You see your JavaScript here. Yeah, this part of what I was trying to say. You can see, I can see what is making the call. This is literally the API key you are using. So you can imagine me just seeing your API key. It's just the same like I see password to your credit card, and this is your credit card number, and then this is your password. Then I can just take it and go and use it to shop. We can return this now. At least you've gotten what I was trying to tell you. Literally, you have your CSS, you have your this under the sources. The network give you what calls you are making and things like that. So other things like security, application, a lot more. You can just read more about this. There are a lot of helpful features in there that you can explore. So, and the main point there is why we actually need server. So let's go back to console, then drag this a bit further back. Yeah, good. So that's why the GraphQL needs a server. So it ensures a lot of things are like routed in through the GraphQL server to handle anything you have. So now, how do you now convert your, okay, we need to set it up. That's B we have. So let us set up GraphQL following the step below. Now, we continue to use the code from our last lesson for the capstone project. So where we call the API, REST API directly. So also at the end of this lesson, I added what the updated code will look like after replacing the direct REST API call with GraphQL. So I usually do that at the end of the lesson. So create package JSON using the command. So we just pick from what we had initially from the previous one. This is what we've got, the dApp frontend JS. So I think we ought to copy this and make it TypeScript, so we don't mix things together. But we've even already mixed the something. So just to make it easier for most of you, let's try and do that. So we have this live now, and I can copy, you remember, then, oops, normally we've done, okay, normally from the previous class this should be 3, so that you can go back and adjust on them. This should be 4, and JavaScript API then from there now we can copy and create for TypeScript. So that helps to ensure the previous code, in case you get stuck, you can always have them for each. So F2, then we can make this GraphQL, and this is the 5th section. Cool. So we need to rename this as well. Web3 dApp, the web front end. Yeah. So this become JS. Yeah, I think we are still using JavaScript, so we can leave it, or you can call it GraphQL, so that the name will be different, you know. Okay, so we open this in terminal, shortcut for code, so that it will open in VS Code. Then we can just try to make it same as this, bring it down. Yeah, as I chose the author. So from here now we can close this. So we are now dealing with the GraphQL. So you will be able to, so that later, if you follow this, the courses, you'll be able to go back, especially as beginner, to make use of those code later. So here we have now, want to set up the GraphQL server. What are the steps we need to take? I can close this as well. Close. So let's go back. So it says to set up the server, we create a package JSON. So for us to create a package JSON, let's open this, are what we need. Then I need to load this so we see what we are doing. Sorry. Go live. Yeah. So we stop this from the previous class, then we can expect to have the console. Yeah. So live reload enabled. We can clear this. Yeah, we got things up. I think everything should be working as usual. Retrieving crypto prices. So now, so cool, we have everything working back as usual. To set up the server, you do pnpm init. You know, right from time you have been following, I prefer pnpm over this npm and JavaScript, or sorry, or as over npm and like yarn, for example. So let's see. Here we can start. We've started the server and we have it loaded and working. So we go to terminal, new terminal. From the terminal, you put pnpm in it. So what this does is initialize a package.json for us. So you see it now. We got this. And what does a package.json does? You know, we are moving from just building a basic HTML page, CSS page. We are now including JavaScript. And I told you, for you to use JavaScript, you need the JavaScript engine to render it. And in your browser, you have like V8 in Google Chrome, and I think Spiderweb or something in Internet Explorer. So for non-browser like this, your terminal and your PC, they use Node.js. That's why we had installed Node.js earlier. That is why this lesson is not meant for you to just jump out at the middle, because there are a lot of things we've done to come to this point. So in case some things are confusing, it isn't that I intentionally did it to be confusing. It's just because you started midway. So I can't help on that. It may just stay confusing. So the only way to do that is to go back to the course from the beginning. So and get all those things set. But if you are following, you should have set up Node.js. So for it to run, we have Node.js. Once you begin to use JavaScript and want to run a real live project, you won't just be using basic HTML and CSS file. You will need like node packages and a lot of other things to run together to make it a more robust dApp. Now, to start, that one of the best way to make managing it for Node much easier is Node package JSON. So what that package JSON does, let's quickly go through it. It gives you a lot of details about your project, from your project name, version. You can change the version. The main entrance of the project, it said, is index.js based on things you are expected to have here and things like that. So now, other things you have is script. These scripts are some things you run in your terminal that you may want to automate or set. So look at this. I want to run this in the terminal. Instead of typing or always copy all this, I can just do pnpm test, and it knows that I want to run this particular script, and it will run it for me. So the same will still add more script as we develop on, but for now, that's how you have. Then you have the keyword, you have the author, then you have the license. So usually you are good to go as we have it as default. You can read more and ask your AI for more questions about the package JSON, or if you have anything left undone. Now we've gotten this created as we have seen it. Then we need to install GraphQL using the command pnpm high represents short of install. So you can either be install, you can use install, or you use I. So pnpm I graph. I used to misspell the GraphQL with G. GraphQL. And then you see we want to install another one. We install GraphQL Apollo server. Now, if we want to use the server, they are like, you know, it's like you are building server for your site. You can host it on different. So there are different platforms that make it easy for us to run GraphQL server. So one of the most popular one is Apollo server, which like it creates on your node environment a kind of feel of a GraphQL server without the need to actually connect with maybe a real one remotely and things like that. So you can work locally, test your dApp and things. So we need to also install this. We can install it separately. Once this is done, then we install this. So, but at the same time, if you have multiple installation like this, you can use shortcut, which is just give a space, then the name of the other one you also want to install, dash server. So even if there are 3-5 of them, just keep putting space and the name of the node package and it will be installed. Let's click enter. Then this will now depend on your network. The faster your network is, the faster you get this done. Now, as this is done, so now I told you, depending on how fast your network is, you see, this has installed as dependencies, and this Apollo server, the version. So since it will install the latest version for us, and GraphQL 16, so maybe the latest stable version or LTS, depending on how they set their default for the package you are installing. So we're on GraphQL 16. I don't know when you will be installing, might be 18, might be 25, and this as well. So, but we have these two, and done in 54 seconds. So that's less than 1 minute. Then when you look at this now, you will notice some things has been added to our package manager, and some other things has been added to our file, like node. You will not need to bother about this. These are, you remember I told you your node. So once you are installing, you install this, it initiates node and some other things into your project. So it's already preparing the environment to run JavaScript. So in your project and any other related JavaScript like API, GraphQL server and things like that. So we are the one that created the media already. So then we also have this come up. This one is auto-generated, so you don't need to tamper with it. It will sort itself because of the package. If you use yarn, you will use, say, yarn lock. If you use npm, you use npm lock and things like that. So all these are auto-generated. You will hardly need to work with them. Now, this package manager as well, see that it has included a new core dependency. Now, one of the advantages of the package manager for us is it will help to keep track of those dependencies. That means those packages your project run on. For example, if I push something like this to GitHub and you need to use it, and I didn't include the dependency, you may have a lot of headache or never get it to run because you might not know the packages I need to have installed into that project like I've done now. But advantage of this is anyone that clone this, let's say it's on GitHub, or you copy it, then once you have it in this package manager, for example, and you just do something like pnpmi, it will go and check your package manager for anything like dependency. We also have dev dependency. You still see them, I think, maybe in other section if we don't cover it in this GraphQL. You will see it there. And what this means is your project depends on it. If these things are not installed on your environment where you are working, you won't be able to have this thing work. It will be broken. It won't work. But we also have dev dependency. Dev dependencies are the ones that your project actually can work without it. Though some features, maybe like auto restart or things like that, may not work. But the difference is that the actual core of the project don't depend on it, and it's only available in development environment. So in your full, when you are deploying to real remote server and all those things, you may not need it there. You understand? So usually those servers will have those things if it's needed. So that's why you need to differentiate them. But once you install it, we want to install the dependency. There's a way we do that installation different from this. But let's keep going. At least we've got this now. You understood. Every other thing remain the same. So let's see what we've got here. That's it for now. Nothing else has changed. Then we have our server now, GraphQL Apollo server. So we need to run it, but before then, we need to convert our REST API to GraphQL API because GraphQL endpoint Now, when you look at this, some platform may have GraphQL endpoint. So with that, you don't need to convert. But if they don't and you need it, then you will need to go through the process of taking the REST API and wrapping it inside a GraphQL endpoint. So behind the scene, the GraphQL will be making the calls. You understand what I'm saying now? So now let's check. How do we do that? Server to wrap it, like I said. So Apollo server, apart from being the server, it also allows you to wrap API or the normal REST API or RESTful API, then access it as a GraphQL endpoint. Now, the first thing, we need to create another file. Let me just try and open some of this code so I don't need to be, coming back here. So it said here we need to create a new file called index.js. And remember, inside here as well, we have it as like our main entry point here. So now we have index.js. Let's see. Define GraphQL schema. You remember we said we have the schema and like the resolver. And the schema is divided into two, like query and like this what and then mutation. So I think we are majorly more of query here because we just want to get details. Remember, we want to replace this index.js, then we did this, then we did this. Now we are here, and then package JSON. So now let's come back here. Index.js, we have every other thing there. So in the index, define your GraphQL schema to include the type representing the data structure you wish to return. So for cryptocurrency price, you might define a crypto price type. So you want to define the type. Those are part of the things that make GraphQL easier to work with, but a bit complex. But once you get this right, and I tell you, you don't need to even know how to do this. Literally, just take this thing you already have here, and tell AI to convert this for you to GraphQL to whatever, or to make the call. Then you have all these things. So that's why I'm saying it is not about keeping this thing in mind. It will be confusing for you first as beginner, but you have AI to always support you. That's the fact now. So it's less difficult to be a programmer compared to before, where you sort everything on your own. Now, the next one is we implement resolver. Resolver defines the technique for fetching the type defined in the schema. This is where you call the CoinGecko API or any other REST API you want to wrap and turn into GraphQL endpoint. So inside the resolver, we make the API call. You see the normal await, fetch, price, response. Remember, we take the JSON response, then which return the object. Then we reiterate through the keys of like price. Then you like map it to ID key, name key, and USD price. So these are the things we need to use. So then the next step will be set up GraphQL Apollo server API endpoint. So instantiate and run the Apollo server with your type, definition, and resolver. So we need to, don't worry, all these things we'll still do it together when we are changing this, but I just want you to have the idea of all the steps we will take. Now, we'll now initiate and run the Apollo server with the type, definition, and resolver. So we need to set, if you have worked, or some of you are not entirely beginner, but as beginner, you need to understand when you are working with anything server, you know that server is like is backend. Server isn't front end anymore. Server is like, unlike front end, anything you do in front end is accessible directly in your browser. But when you're dealing with server, this is done, and only result that they need you to access is sent to the front end. So that's what is happening here, and we need to make sure we like listen and decide the port we want this thing to be accessible. So that's where we have the endpoint. Remember the previous one, when we were doing this, these people already set the endpoint for their API. So the same thing, you need to use this to set like endpoint for the GraphQL, where people can send requests to and get the information back. So in this case, you will be the one sending the request and getting the call and getting response back. So when you send request to it, it send request to the API, get it for you, organize to whatever you need, shed off what is not needed, and then you. So for example, if the platform already have GraphQL, then you don't need to do API, cut that off. You just get what you need straight away. Now let's replace REST API call with GraphQL in JavaScript. So now we want to do the practical. We want to replace the API call we did with this. This API call we did here, I want to replace it to be, instead of direct API call, I want to make it with GraphQL. So like I said, if the platform you want to use provide GraphQL endpoint, then it even makes your work easier, because they will already tell you things you can use, the query, the other things, can you just use them directly, just like all these ones. The API, direct REST API also tell you which one you use and all those things. So let's take the step one by one. So here now, update the fetch function. For us to achieve that, we need to update our fetch function from what it was, which was this, to this. You can see that the core, the way it's structured is slightly different. And here, instead of calling API call directly, it's trying to call the endpoint we set. In this case, for the GraphQL Apollo server, is running at localhost 5000. So if this is remote, it won't be localhost. So, and then we get things back, process it, and then we can present it out. So let's see this, then call the updated function just like before. This function JavaScript will not work until we make a call to it like this. So we call it, then we can begin to use it in our whatever we are doing, trying to make it. So don't worry, I have all the code for you, all this already put together, and I will still test it out with you. So the next one you are doing is auto restart the GraphQL. So now when we look at all these things we have tried to do here, if you try to put this together like this, now let's see if we put this together. Inside our JavaScript file, we implement the resolver. Remember, those are the two things your GraphQL will have. Then the only other thing is to actually create the endpoint you should operate from. Like if it is your website.com/crypto price, you understand? That's your own endpoint when you are having it in remote server, but now it's just local server, so you need local host URL. So in that case, we'll use this to create where it should be operated from. So that's why we have this. So if you follow the step, you still achieve it. So as you are now, we have set up our, you see, Apollo server GraphQL. Then we set the type, the ID, the name, the USD price, then the query to get the price, the crypto price, which will give us this form. Then we resolve it by first we fetch the data. Then once we fetch the data, we can formalize it to this type we have. Then where do we make the server? The server with the type defined and the resolver should come at a particular ports, in this case port, but in remote normal particular URL. So we can put that here, so we know specific port we should check. So let's see, are we done with that? Then we need to update the fetch as well for it to work, but I don't want to just do that because I want us to use the actual code, then I will use that to explain. Then we have this section. It's talking about auto restart GraphQL. It is time to run the GraphQL server and add front end. So we'll come back to here. This one show you steps for you to run the server actually. So we'll run it, but before we do that, this is the capstone, this is the token dApp minter. We now want to convert it. This is the previous existing code. Then after you implement this thing, this is what you should have. So your package JSON will look like this. So good. Let's quickly copy those and then I will explain them, whatever changed. You notice something changed here. We have this starts node 1 changed here. It wasn't involved before. I will explain how we make use of this. You will see it at work now, and you will see that there's a div dependency here. We need to install this as well for it to work. So let me go back so you don't get confused. That's what this step is telling us. Now once we have our GraphQL, how do we run it? You understand? I want it to be much clearer. Let me see. Auto restart GraphQL. Let's call the function. If we go back to this C, we can run the GraphQL with this code. So let's try that. Let's try it so we don't get confused. Now this, where is that? This is the GraphQL Apollo server. We've set it up. So we can run it with, if you want to run it now, you will need to run it just like when you click this one to run like the front end. To run the server, you need to run that specific file using node to execute it. So now for us, we need to still set this. So I just want to give you an idea so that in case you get confused. But the disadvantage of this is that if you make any changes, each time you have to run this node index. Like now, this index file, if I make any change, I'm coming, can I do a little? I want us to use this code. So I will use that to explain. Because I know this code is complete. Cool. I want you to have a better experience of it and not get confused. So now you can see that I have the port. Now I will see it at localhost port column 5000. Good. Now let's go and run this. I can clear this. Yeah, to make it clear. Here now, you type this node, then the file we are running, which this is the server, right? So we are running it index.js. Then run. Look at what will happen. Do you see it? Server ready at this. So if we open this now, coming, click here and click follow link, you will see what will happen. You see, ready to explore. You have your server running. Just, it's like you yourself created this type of endpoint, but instead of the REST API, you are creating for GraphQL. So this ones you are also running are like running on the server for you to be able to use it. So the same is what you are seeing here. So it's like we created our own API endpoint, but this time it's GraphQL powered by Apollo server. So we can start making requests to it and it will give us feedback of whatever it has. And in this case, what does it have? Behind it, it may call to our CoinGecko REST API, get the feedback and help us structure it to extract only what we need and send it to the dApp front end. So let's explore that. So you got the idea now that we now have this server running at this port. So whatever port we put here is what will happen. So this is the issue now. If I come here now, you see I have, and I decide to change something from this, it will not take effect. And that means if I'm running this on the front end, it will not take effect. You understand what I'm saying? So for it to take effect, you see that it doesn't even know I change anything in the server script. And this is it. So I have to first do this, Ctrl+C or Command+C, stop the server. If I go here now and try to run it, you will see the server is dead. Then start it again manually with that. And if I like make changes 5, 10, 20, 30 times, I will have to be doing this all the time for the GraphQL server to be up and then be able to serve my front end, which I don't want that. That won't help me as a developer or make me professional. So and also be stressful and take a lot of time. So that is where we now need a div dependency called NodeMon. So what does NodeMon does? NodeMon help you to literally, where is the auto restart? Yeah, you see. So NodeMon will help you to listen to anytime there's a, once you make changes, it will save. Once it sees you save and there are changes done, it restarts that server automatically. So it's like something that is helping you to run this particular instruction without you actually having to stop run. So it listing, stop, run it itself. So it automates it. That's what brought about this particular code you saw here. Let me go back here. This. That's why I had to show you, because it will be confusing for beginners. So I hope you got how we got this now, and you install it as div dependent, because when you see, it doesn't actually, it's not really needed for this thing to run. So that's why it's not part of dependent. It's just to speed up your own instead of refreshing. But usually when you are paying and setting up remote host server, you usually have some of these already part of the core of the infrastructure. So that help you make sure your server is auto restarting each time. Most of them just give you as box. You just tick it when setting up the server. Then it will just listen, and anytime you make changes, it will show it up. So you can see this GraphQL and every other thing is the same. And then the other one that isn't the same again is this. So I hope you get it now. Then if we want to do that, let's do it together. Then we can as well come here. Let's stop the server now. We're not using it yet. I will advise you make multiple terminals. So just click the plus sign. So one should be for like general things you are doing, the other for the server, GraphQL server, and the other one for any other thing. Maybe I want the front end. Assuming we are not using this live server, I want to use the front end like Node Dev or something like that. So in this case now, let's see this. Inside there now, we want to run is this one running? Okay, we can run it here, but later we can use other one as well. But at least that shows you can have multiple something to run them. So here we can have PNPMI. I should just copy it here. You see, dev dependency. You see, we do save dev. I think we can also use a shortcut -div. Am I correct? Let me see. -div node more. Let's see if it's correct to install. So it's like the way I short install to I. This, I think there's also a shortcut for, instead of this save div, you can just have it done for you with that short. Let's enter and see if it works. Good. So it means it's, I will see. I'm not sure it's correct yet. So if it install it as div dependency, then you'll get it here. All these are just based on your network, how fast your network is. So while that is up, let's create a kind of script, this script. So instead of even copying, I can just extend so you understand it better. You see, if you enter, there will be error here. Let's see. Then anything you want, the name you want to use, we want to use, in that place we use start. Right? Is this start? Yeah, I think so. Then, what is the script you want to run? We want to run node mon. Remember, like we are running node index, that's the file .js. So you see, this already have the node. Once it saw it listen and detect saved changes, it will trigger the node index to be executed. So start, you see there's error because before you move to next, you need to put a comma. But the last one, you don't put a comma. See, if I put comma, there will be error. If there won't be anything before the bracket, then you shouldn't put the C. Trailing, you have to remove it. But if there will be another thing next, you have to make sure it's there. If it's not there, it also complain of error. And this will not work. So I just try to break it down for beginners that are following to ensure to the file content overwrite. Okay. So now you see we have done this. So what will happen is I can just do pnpm start, and then it will run this instead of node mon index or this node index all the time. Then one thing is, once I start this, it will keep running until I stop it. Any changes, it will adjust itself to it. So let's give it another try again. This is the index. So it has installed the node mod. That's why we're able to use it there as well. So now, like I told you, if I do pnpmi, it will check if there's anything I didn't install. Do you see? So this remove the node more. That's the issue I'm having, and no wonder it was saying there's compatibility error. Let's come back here. Let's reinstall it. Okay, once it installed, it updated it, but I also did the change, so I should have waited for the changes, but I want to use it to show you how this will be done. So let's quickly wait for this to be done. And then while that's, then we can do npm start and get it done. So you now see there's no more confusion in that aspect. So we have this done. We have this package JSON done. That's why I have all the code there for you. Then the JavaScript code we had before, we need to convert this to TypeScript as well. Sorry. That was a mistake. So we are not yet in TypeScript. TypeScript is still coming up. So we are just going to use the code as we have it here. But we need to adjust something here. That was what, I think I'm confusing this thing with TypeScript, sorry. That's what was happening. He said we should replace this. Remember, update the fetch function. We should have done that. I was mistaken with TypeScript, sorry. Now let's go back. So that was the call we were making before, but now we need to change it. So it's now making the call to localhost, and you can see the query, the structure of how whatever the call we get here will be handled and all those things. So we can remove this. Then it's still the same since it's the same name, crypto prices. So literally we have replaced the API call, direct one, with a GraphQL endpoint call. So you see the structure is a bit different. Query and all those things are now there. So now let's have a kind of a rewind on this GraphQL crash course. What did we learn, and at the same time the practical we did, so that there won't be any. Those are the basic things we've done set up. We are able to convert the REST API to GraphQL. Then we replace the REST API call with GraphQL call. So we set up all this, and let's rewind what we did. Here we have this code, the package JSON. First, when we started, we learned about, let's quickly go up. We learned about GraphQL being a kind of what you use when you have complex dApp and you want to handle a lot of back and forth API calls. So to compress things, to reduce overfetching or underfetching, reduce the endpoint you need to make calls for, reduce your bandwidth usage caused by the API call and all those related things, then you go for GraphQL. If not, if you are just dealing with a simple calls or just happen once in a while, then you are cool to just set up the simple RESTful API. So because you don't need to set up external server or something to run. But if the platform has GraphQL endpoint, then you don't need to set up the server. We set up the server because we ourselves created the endpoint. So if you have a platform that already created the endpoint for you, then you can just use the whatever GraphQL endpoint they expose to you to fetch through the query and mutation or whatever you can do. Now, from there, we were able to look at what structure makes up GraphQL, talk about two structure, the schema and the resolver. So we have the schema divided into two. which is schema, the query and schema mutation. Query just to call like just your normal REST API. So what it does is to make requests. But the mutation aspect is the aspect that you can create, update, and delete. So that both of them combined makes it possible to perform like the CRUD CRUD operation. That means create, read, update, and delete data. So we got all the examples. Then the next we talk about GraphQL resolver, which help you resolve, fetch data, and all those things. Then the section B, we talked about set up GraphQL server. So, and I told you because the API, CoinGecko API, we used to fetch the crypto here. Price doesn't give us the GraphQL. So we had to create our own. And because of that, we need to run our own GraphQL server. So like I said, if you have a platform that already have their GraphQL endpoint, you don't need to run the server. You just connect with it from because they would have given you the endpoint, except if they also maybe have key and things like that to restrict usage, then you may need to set up. But if it's just direct, like those free CoinGecko API, REST API will just connect direct. So now, when you want to set up your GraphQL, you need to create your package JSON running the npm init. If this is your first video, you should know that I prefer npm over npm and yarn. So then install GraphQL using the command install GraphQL, and then install GraphQL Apollo server. This Apollo server is what makes it possible to have a local server representation to run GraphQL. And at the same time, it allows you to wrap any REST API and convert it to GraphQL endpoint. So now install server using the command. So these are how you install. And once you install, you have your package manager. Sorry, your package JSON. Let's do this. So your package JSON, then you have something like this, except for you don't have this. So you are able to run the server by, I think before we run the server, we have to convert the REST API. So, and that is by setting up the index.js file, which is this. So we are able to set up the type. That means we define the type, the structure we need our data to be in. So it makes things organized. Then once it's received to be processed into, once it's received from this CoinGecko API. Yeah. So from there, we are able to set up the resolver, which wrap up our REST API, CoinGecko REST API to fetch the crypto prices. Then over here, we need to set up the port at which it will be accessible. So in this case, since we are on local, we have to use localhost, then the port, which will be localhost colon. The port, like you are saying, say localhost, then colon 5000. This is the port. So if you use 4000 here, it will be 4000. If you use 5001 or whatever, that's what you'll be able to use to connect with that server over here as well. So then we also have our let's go live. So we have our token here, and then we'll see how we'll run the server. So once you set up the crypto GraphQL Apollo server with this index file, then the next thing you are now able to run it. So implement resolver, all those three things we implement, and then the next one is replace the REST API call with GraphQL. So the step 4 or section D is now for us to take the previous global script, this previous call we got here, where we made direct call to, let me do this. Okay, we made direct call to the CoinGecko API while we were under the API crash course. Then if you miss it, you can watch it. So here we replace it entirely with our GraphQL based call so that it can fetch this endpoint that is created from this index.js server, GraphQL Apollo server. So it gets connected to it, and that is able to connect with the CoinGecko API, reformat the structure we want, then send it to make it accessible in this endpoint. Then by connecting with this endpoint, we are able to fetch the crypto prices and data and display them. Yep, the next one will be just before. Let's call the function. So as usual, without calling it, this will not work. So we'll call it there. Then we now talk about running the server. So usually you want to run the server. I told you you have to always do like node and then the current file, the name, we call it index.js. So if you have callable, usually it's like index.js. So if you have called it other things, the server or whatever, make sure that is what you start. And for you to start, you have to do node and do node index.js or whatever file name you have it before you can run the GraphQL server. So until you run the GraphQL server, you cannot be able to access it to work here. That's why even if you load here, you see that this is just saying retrieving crypto price, because that was what we set up in the HTML. What is that? Yeah, index.html. You see it? That, no, retrieving crypto prices. So once you see this, it tells you that your API call, your GraphQL API call or REST API call has not received feedback that could be displayed for whatever issue. So if it keep displaying this, you may need to inspect and see if there's any error. Go to console. We have discussed so much about the console. So let's restart it. See, error connection refused. So you see, it's telling me now that we are making a call, but it's being refused. Yeah, because the server isn't up here. So the server isn't up. So I now told you, if you make any changes, you need to always stop this server. If you adjust anything, let's assume you adjust the CoinGecko API from Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. You want to add other coin or remove any other crypto from a coin or token. When you save it, it doesn't take effect. You have to stop this server manually again. Like if I run it now, you can see it that is running. So it's running here, and I have to just use, if I go back here now, you see this will start working. Yeah, you can see it, but with time it will load. You see it now. So it's possible I get the price now if there is no issue with the REST API. And now read property of node. So at times, if it's not getting feedback, you can see it. We didn't do anything, just refresh, and then all the error gone, and we have this working. So this is working. The only side issue is that if you want to add, let's say we want to adjust this token now, and we are removing, let's say, Jupiter from here. If we are removing Jupiter from here and I save it, you see it's still showing me Jupiter price. Why? Because this is not auto updated. So I have to stop, Control C or Command C, stop the server. It's not even stopping. Wow. Yeah, I have to stop it. Then save this, and then restart it again. When I restart it, it won't show anything, but if I restart it, you see. So I'm just recapping because we've learned a lot and you might be confused. So if you see this now, it's actually running. If I restart here, I will be able to recover the price, you see, and it's not displaying the price. But that wasn't working before. So you can imagine you are working, you are testing, I need to stop. So that's why we introduce the auto restart. So what that does is you include a node package called nodeman. So this nodeman, what it does is it's able to listen to this server, and it's not just about this GraphQL server. I've also used it to set up API calls server for AI tools and other things like that to communicate with like OpenAI API and things like that. So it's based on my experience, it works as long as it's like a server and you want to listen to it, you want it to be on, then that's when you install or install it as a div server developer dependency, which means it's only useful during development, so not on production. So you can see it. We got do we still have this missing package money package JSON? Yeah, so I think that was the old package JSON. So I refresh it, reloaded it now, and you can see it. It has the nodemon. Then I think this is the version of GraphQL, but don't mind this. You can, by the time you will be doing it, it might be version 18 or 20 or more and things like that. So, but this nodemon as well. So I think this makes sure you are able to work with higher version. So you can see the nodemon by installing it as, I think this even installed it as dependency, which is actually wrong. It should have installed as div dependency. So call me. So I need to remove it, save it. So I think those are what I was trying to fix. Then we need to stop this server. Well, it's difficult to stop at times. So from here now, let's just do npm install, that's I. Then I think the shortcut for, instead of this -- save -- div can just be -div. Let's see, -d, sorry. Let's see if that works. Then we need it to install nodemon. So depending on your network, how fast your network is, depend on the time it will take. When it's installed as dependency again. So it means I didn't get the short D well. So this, you can just copy it, the full pnpmi -save -div, then this, so that I can install it as, you see that was installed. So I deleted it from being dependency, it's now installed. So this one now, if I close this, changes you made to package. So let's see it. You can see it now. Good. So this is the correct installation. So it's different from the essential dependency that the project itself depend on this Apollo server and the GraphQL, but it doesn't depend on nodemon. It can run, it can work well. you see we were able to use it without node more. But the node more is just to automate things. So from there now I can, let me just clear this to make things cleaner. So all I need now, since I'm using I use pnpm, is whatever the script here. So I'll just do pnpm start. So first let's check here. If we go back and reload, it's not loading, and this also will not display because you see there is no server now. So once we do this, whatever this script here is, just add pnpm and run it. So start, let's see. So do you see it now that this server is running this? And let's reload. You see it is now running as usual, but now with the addition of the fact that we can adjust the server on the fly, and then you see it's working, but the Jupyter crypto is not there. So remember we removed it previously from here. So I can just say Solana, Jupyter. Now observe what will happen here now. The moment I save, do you see restarting due to changes, starting node, and then you see the server restarted immediately, and then we had this. You understand what I'm saying now? So now this server is different from this front end, but you know we are using live server for the front end, which just work like this node for the node more work for server, but the live server plugin for VS Code work for front end. So it's listening to anything that changes in the HTML or CSS or the basic, you understand, and then reload. So once it reloads, since the server also reload, it reload previously, the server also reload, then shows the new update. It didn't reload because it didn't see any changes, but I reloaded it myself, but no changes. But now you can see the changes there very, very clearly. So that's just the major thing we have gone through. I just feel we have covered a lot in the crash course for you to have a rerun of it, and all the codes we use are here for you. In case you try things and get stuck, you can always check where you get it wrong to copy them and use them from here. So that's it. We've really gone a long way with this GraphQL crash course, and I believe even if you have never worked with GraphQL course before, and maybe even get scared like, oh, GraphQL, that stuff, I believe within under 1.5 hours or less than 2 hours, we have been able to crash everything down and see how to get, and we are able to, and you are now able to use it in your project. So that's it. Don't forget, we have if you got we have resources here you can as well consult to learn more, and if you have any question, please use the comments. I don't answer questions. That's why most platform where you see our content, even some of this lesson maybe on YouTube or other platform, we usually remove the option for comment because it's too stressful for me. Imagine attending to a lot of students and then answering questions on YouTube, on Discord, on Twitter. So that's why everything is focused just on the platform. Join the platform, it's free. Apply, prove you are what's been approved because it's free. The DP University, you can access all these courses, they are free. So we just want to be sure you are really serious about what you want to get in, and once you are in, you can always ask your question. Take time to read any other student question you have seen. You will learn a lot from it. Then you should not repeat the same question again. So, and specific question, don't ask GraphQL crash course question under API. You won't get answer, it might even be deleted. So API question under API crash course, GraphQL under GraphQL, so specific, and that will help us better. So also be part of the DPU Discord server, so you link and connect with. I may not be answering questions in terms of this on there, but you can connect and get support from other community member and other Web3 developer around the world. That's it for this lesson. I remain Solomon Foske of the Programming University. Keep the program sweet and alive, and please always do good to humanity with your programming skill and not evil, to make the world a better place for us all. Bye.